We're here, of course, to talk about and announce the concurrent resolution that was introduced by myself, actually by Senator Gallivan in the Senate, with me as a co-sponsor, and I know it was also introduced in the Assembly, a resolution that would rescind the executive order, the directive, regarding bars and restaurants having to close the curfew of 11 p.m. This was, of course, debated and discussed on the floor of the Senate a couple weeks ago when we extended the governor's emergency powers. And it was brought up that we can, the legislature has the ability, of course, to rescind any directive, which we've had for the better part of a year, and the majorities have never done. And they encouraged us. They encouraged my colleague, Senator Borrello, and others to introduce specific resolutions rescinding specific directives. So 2 weeks ago, or maybe a week ago, we introduced a resolution that would rescind the ridiculous directive that you have to order food when you order a drink. If you're at a bar, you have to have a plate of chicken wings or a salad in order to make sure that you don't apparently spread COVID when you're having a beverage, which of course we know there's no science behind. No science behind that. And in fact, that was specifically mentioned by the Deputy Majority Leader on the floor of the debate as being one that was not based in science and should be done away with. That resolution has yet to be put on the resolution calendar. This latest resolution would get rid of the curfew because there is no science that says that at 10:59 you're not able to spread, but at 11:01 you are. There's no science behind this resolution, and at a time when our establishments, our small businesses are crying out for some type of relief, have hung on for the better part of a year, I think it's high time we recognize that there is no science. We're opening up other things. The curfew has been lifted for other things, but not for bars and restaurants, and it's high time that that happens. This should be both of these resolutions should pass unanimously through both houses if the majorities are willing to put them on the floor for a vote. And of course, since we passed the bill extending the governor's powers, not one directive has changed, except at the discretion of the governor. Not one directive has been rescinded. The governor is still making and calling all the shots related to COVID and the public health crisis that we face here in New York State. I want to thank my colleagues, both Senator Gallivan, as well as Senator Helming, Senator Borrello, and my entire conference, Senator Serino, who I know have sponsored and spoke highly and in favor of this resolution. And I also want to thank my colleagues in the Assembly who have supported this as well, including our next speaker, a friend of mine, a partner here in Albany, and that is Assembly Leader Will Barclay.
Thank you, Leader Ort, and good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure for me to be here. I think Leader Ort did a great job setting out the circumstance, but let me make a couple emphasis on a few things that he said. Throughout this whole pandemic, we've heard time and time again that we must follow the science. We must follow the science. But then we get these orders, these executive directives coming from the governor that don't seem like, they seem arbitrary. They're not following the science. Why is it we can lift curfews on gyms, casinos, bowling alleys, and pool halls, but we can't do it on restaurants and bars? And I'm going to tell you, this is having a real extreme economic impact on those facilities, on those restaurants and bars. 8,000 restaurants have closed in New York State since this pandemic. Restaurant sales are down 44%. And you know, a couple weeks ago we had a big debate in the Assembly and the Senate about the governor's powers. And when we finished that debate, the Democrats came out and they said, we revoked the governor's powers. We revoked the governor's powers. Well, here's a great example. Nothing's changed. Nothing's changed. It's remained the same. The majorities have the ability to pull these powers back. We wanted to revoke them at that time. They wouldn't do it. And now they clearly won't do it at this time. So we have to keep this up. It's hurting our economy. It's hurting our small businesses. And as I said, unfortunately, it's not based in science. So thank you, Leader Ort. Thank the members of our conference, the Assembly Republican Conference, and I want to thank the members of the Senate Republican Conference. We're going to keep on these issues. We're going to keep pushing, and we're going to make the public aware of these arbitrary rules that the governor's instituted, because it's high time to pull them back. With that, I'd like to introduce Senator Borrello.
Thank you, Leader Barclay. Thank you, Leader Ort. You know, I've said many times in the past that I bear the scars of doing business in New York State. And right now I'm standing here in front of you talking about the scars, the irreparable damage that has been done to our hospitality industry. And if you look around in your neighborhoods, you see the shuttered businesses. And here we are, day 18, after the Democrats said, we've rescinded his powers. And here we are at day 18, and nothing has changed at all, except for one thing: more businesses have closed. More restaurants will close and never reopen. More people are deciding to pack their bags and move out of New York. Meanwhile, we listened as our colleagues on the other side of the aisle said horrible things about the governor on the floor. They called him a liar. They called him untrustworthy. And yet they voted to extend his powers until he sees fit. That is not what I call doing what's in the best interest of the people of New York. You know, we talked about the impact that this is having, but in particular in my district, you know, my district borders the state of Pennsylvania. You have states like Pennsylvania that, as of April 4th, are rescinding all of their curfews. That's going to have a direct negative impact on those that live on the border especially. You are literally a 5-minute drive from some points in my district to the state of Pennsylvania. So we're going to suck more business out of New York State. We're going to suck more income. And that sucks because our governor's still in charge. And it's about damn time that we stood up and reasserted ourselves as a separate, co-equal branch of government we are supposed to be. So we have that opportunity once again. When I questioned Senator Gianaris specifically about this particular bill, he said, well, we were going to follow the science, and he kind of dodged the question. Well, there is no science here. And if you're in the restaurant business like I am, right now we're already suffering with lower capacities, even at 75%. Some places can't even achieve that because they still have to follow the other distancing rules. So now you're saying to them, if somebody walks in and orders some food at 10:30 and a drink, they got to kick them out at 11. That's not how hospitality works. Okay? We stop serving at a certain hour, but we let people finish their meals. We let them finish their conversations. We let them finish their drinks. And COVID has no idea what time it is. And just like this is not based in science, neither are many other policies that this government has continued to force down the throats of our small businesses. We employ thousands of people in the restaurant and hospitality business. These people are your friends and neighbors. These are people that are hanging on by a thread. And while they're doing a victory dance next door, our friends and neighbors are packing up and leaving New York State forever. We lead the country in outmigration. And this is just one more nail in the coffin of business, and one more nail in the coffin of revenue, and one more nail in the coffin of our friends, our neighbors, and our loved ones here in New York State. It's got to stop, and it's got to stop today. We have an imperative, a moral imperative, to do this right away. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. And now I would like to introduce Assembly Member Jarrett Gandolfo.
Thank you, Senator. So we're a few weeks after we supposedly repealed the governor's emergency powers, yet we have two restrictions that we're here to talk about today that have no basis in data or logic. We have the 11 p.m. restaurant curfew and the food requirement. And we are supposed to believe that you are safe from COVID at 10:58 in a restaurant, but once 11:01 hits, it's dangerous. Are we supposed to believe that a cheeseburger on the table protects you from the virus? It makes no sense. And the governor is refusing to lift these nonsensical rules, but the legislature could do it for him. We could pass these resolutions to rescind the curfew and this ridiculous food requirement. We could do it tomorrow. So I would call on my colleagues in the Assembly majority and across the building in the Senate majority. They should bring these resolutions to the floor and let us have a vote. I think the people would love the people of our state would love if we lifted these ridiculous rules. And I would challenge Governor Cuomo to say with a straight face that it is safe to be in a casino or a pool hall after 11, but not at your local diner or so-and-so's bar and grill. So with that, I'll turn it over to Senator Sue Serino. I'm sure she could add to this pretty well.
Good afternoon. The state keeping these arbitrary curfew in place is all you need to see to understand that the supermajority did nothing to meaningfully repeal the governor's emergency powers, as my colleagues have said. But as someone who actually spent decades working as a waitress, a bartender, and a restaurant manager, it is clear that those making these arbitrary rules have never spent any amount of time trying to run any of these businesses. We're here today talking about the random 11 o'clock p.m. curfew, and our conferences, as you know, have introduced a resolution to do away with that, and the outrageous rule that requires the purchase of food with a drink. But these are only two of the job-killing and illogical rules the state has advanced during this time. We also have bars, restaurants, and independent venues that have been crippled by the inability to sell tickets to their musical performances, despite being allowed to still offer music. How does that work? It doesn't. We also have barcades that have not been allowed to open at all, one full year, and having to pay their bills every single month. Doesn't work. We have restaurants being allowed to open at a 75% capacity, but too many of them that cannot actually accommodate that many people and still abide by the current distancing rules. The list of the state-created problems goes on, and like you've always heard me say, Albany lives in a bubble. And while the governor and his political advisors continue to set arbitrary and contradictory rules from their ivory tower, it is the people in our communities who suffer the very real consequences. It's the single parents, the caretakers, the college students, the people who are working day and night to help support their families who can't get their jobs back, or the people who have gotten their jobs back but can no longer afford to make ends meet because they're so limited in how many they can serve. From day one, our small business owners and employees have made them tremendous sacrifices in the name of public health. And now, as we look to rebuild, it is time for the legislature to do all that it can to put an end to these haphazard rules. Policymakers must remember that ultimately, it's not going to be the state that revitalizes our communities. It will be the small business owners and the employees of our favorite local establishments who bring about a resurgence. It is time now for the state to stop micromanaging and allow our small businesses to get to work to doing what they do best, moving our communities and our state forward. Thank you. And, oops. Oh. Yep. And now I'd like to introduce Assemblyman Michael Riley. Thanks.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you to the leaders for organizing this, for everybody that put together this resolution on behalf of our business owners that we represent. Now, being a member from New York City, I can tell you that the inequity that we see in the governor's powers over New York City restaurants. Now, the bars in New York City, which is a thriving force of New York City, are pretty much dead. Why? Because the legislature fails to act. The majorities had this authority, as you've heard over and over again. On debate a couple of weeks ago, they said, we're going to relook at it, and we're going to look at those rules, and we're going to change them. Somebody mentioned 18 days have gone by. Not one look. Who's looking after Aunt Butchie's on the South Shore of Staten Island? That restaurant. Who's looking for Joyce's Tavern? Who's looking for all those restaurants, our friends, our neighbors, who have been crippled socially, emotionally, and financially? No one is, but we are. And we are going to hold the pressure to the Democrats on the majority in both houses. You said you wanted to act. You said you wanted to review. You said you wanted to change. Now's the time. If you don't act, you are letting those restaurants, those families, hurt even more. So think about your friends, think about your neighbors, think about your family members. Let's take away this nonsensical rule. Because let me tell you, just think back not too long ago. What did this do? This hit those businesses with thousands of dollars in fines with the SLA. Why? Because it's a rule that had no science and base. But I tell you, it got them $20,000 each time. Is that what we're looking to do? To keep crippling them? So I plead with my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, let's get this done today. Thank you. And I'd like to introduce, next up, Senator Alexis White. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you for being here. This is such an important topic. We have to remember that these are our small businesses. These are the backbones of our community, and quite often, these are the draw to our Main Street. These are the reason people come to Main Street and shop in the first place, is to stop at our local bars and restaurants and have a bite to eat before, during, and after their shopping trip. They were there to support us during the pandemic. They delivered food. They made changes and adjustments that cost them a fortune so that they could continue to serve first responders, to serve all of our residents who couldn't get out and about. They were there for us, and this is our time to be there for them. This is an important time to remember that they are major employers in our communities. From dishwashers to cooks to waitresses to hostesses to managers, you name it. They are major employers within our community. And again, they are the backbone of our community, and it's important that we fight for them. These curfews that have been lifted on other stores, this is an opportunity for our bars and restaurants to make sure that even if they're operating at 75% capacity, they need those hours of operation so that they can make their bottom line. They're struggling to deal with fines that they were hit with, as was mentioned by Assemblyman Riley. $20,000 a hit over and over again for fines from the SLA. That was really just revenue. That was not to protect us. These restaurants and bars suffered enough. They've been fighting for us, and it's our turn to fight for them and lift these curfews so that they can get back to doing business and they can generate a profit and stay alive so that we can continue to have business thriving in New York State. Thank you. I'd like to introduce Assemblywoman Jody Giglio.
It's time to get New York businesses off of life support. Cuomo's rules and restrictions are not based on science. One thing is for sure, that the businesses cannot operate this way. And since a significant part of our economy depends on tourism and hospitality, a lot of people are going to be wiped out if we don't let them get back to work. So far, according to the comptroller, 160,000 people have lost their jobs that were in the hospitality industry. So far, thanks to the governor's mandates, and 1 out of every 6 restaurants in New York have been forced out of business. They had loans to pay and the rent was due. We as legislators cannot sit idly by and continue. The trickle-down effect to the ancillary businesses is also immense, and a lot of people are suffering. It's time to act. Legislators from both sides of the aisles have said that extraordinary powers granted to the governor at the start of COVID pandemic must be rescinded. We have been fighting to repeal his executive powers, which have been extended for him to modify and extend with no end date. The unpredictability and uncertainty for local businesses and restaurants and bars is unsustainable. While we have CPS workers and troopers storming into restaurants and bars, writing tickets and fines, we need to get them back to protecting our children and to making sure that crime on the street is under control. I have argued from day one that these decisions are best by the elected officials. They're best made by us. We're the closest to the people, and now is the time for us to do our job. To my colleagues, I thank you all for being here today. It's time to listen to the pleas of our constituents. It's time to let restaurants, pubs, and catering halls fully reopen. To the business owners, please hang in there. We're fighting for you. To my neighbors and friends and family, continue to take the precautions that will keep you safe. If you don't feel comfortable going out, stay home. But at least you know that as an American and a New Yorker living in a state governed by the people and for the people, you have the choice to do so. Thank you. Yes. And I would now like to invite up to the podium my esteemed colleague from the Senate, Pam Helming. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Leaders, thank you for organizing this. We need to lift our curfew on bars and restaurants, just as the state has done for other businesses. Listen, when each and every one of us, all of my colleagues standing here, when we make a decision, we look at number one, public safety, and number two, what are the facts? We need, and we're calling on Governor Cuomo to do the same thing. Look at the facts and allow the restaurants to open fully. And it appears the governor is not willing to take that action. We need our colleagues in the majority to start speaking up, and not only speaking up, but to actually take meaningful action to make changes. This morning, I had a call from another upset constituent. This one was a mayor of a small community that I represent. He wants to know why it feels like Albany is nothing more than a crapshoot. Roll the dice, and the governor decides who are going to be the lucky ones, which businesses are going to be allowed to open. That's not the way we should be governing. The mayor wanted to know, why does it seem like the governor is always picking winners and losers? Why is it that certain businesses can open, but our small restaurants and bars are not allowed to? And you know what? I think these are all wonderful questions. I have no good reason. Does anyone have a good answer on why the governor is making these arbitrary and capricious calls? I don't know. It reminds me so much of the schools, right? On February 25th, during the public hearing on health for the budget, and Dr. Zucker said that he would have a decision on when schools could open within a week. We're still waiting, right? Crickets, still waiting. Same thing with bars and restaurants. When it comes to extending the restaurant curfew, the state has said that it will make this decision later in April. But so many of our bars and restaurants, they're hanging on by a string. They're not going to make it much longer. They're an integral part of our local and our state regional economies. You know, Easter's just around the corner. The nice weather's here. As we've heard other people say, patrons are starting to go out more. They're beginning to travel. They want to support our local bars and restaurants. Expanding indoor seating to 75%, it really does little, not with that 6-foot distancing still in place. Think about it. It really makes no sense. We must also eliminate the mandate that requires customers to purchase food with alcohol orders. And we need to help our small businesses by just letting them do their business. You know, I think about, somebody mentioned first responders, emergency providers, nurses and stuff. Think of all those people who are working that 3 to 11 shift. I used to be one of those shift workers. And you know what? There are some days when we wanted to go out at the end of our shift, have a drink or have a bite to eat. But now our first responders, our frontline workers, they're being told, sorry, you can battle COVID all day long in your work, but if you want a bite to eat at 11 o'clock, something happens. I don't know. COVID in the bars and restaurants becomes a threat. This is what I have to say. No more delays. No more. Let's follow the science and lift the onerous restrictions and let our bar and restaurants get back to work. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Helming, and I want to thank all my colleagues from the Assembly and the Senate who spoke today, and of course, Leader Barclay for his support. And just to be clear and to close before we get into questions, we could sit here and talk all day long about a bill that said it was going to do one thing and did the exact opposite. We could talk about the governor and certainly, I'm sure we probably will, and why he makes decisions he makes. The point is, though, the state legislature, the Democrats who like to tout their numbers in the Senate and the Assembly, have the power to do something about this today. At some point, tough talk only gets you so far. Now is the time they could vote for it. They'll have all these votes here, plus whatever they could find on their side. And we would pass this today, and our bars and our restaurants, and I think this is important. It's not just the bar owners or the restaurant owners. It's the dishwashers. It's the waiters. It's the waitresses. It's the bartenders. There's a lot of regular New Yorkers. This is their job. This is how they bring food and money into their homes to pay their mortgages and their rents and feed their families. That's who's being hurt the most by these arbitrary and unscientific directives. And that's what these resolutions would fix. That's who they would help immediately. So again, these directives don't follow any other science but political science, and we're looking to undo that with these resolutions. So with that, I want to thank everyone for being here, and certainly am happy to take, well, if we could do on-topic questions first, and then when those are all done, because there may be a couple off-topic questions, we'll go to off-topic. So any on-topic questions? Any on-topic questions? The resolution was introduced. They're well aware of it. They both have numbers. And her deputy leader talked about one of the resos on the floor during the debate, how it has no basis in science. I don't know what other conversations need to happen. They know, they're well aware of the resolution, they're well aware of what it would do, and many of their members, I believe, would support it if it was put on the floor for a vote today, yesterday, or tomorrow.
Since they passed a new law that changed the governor's emergency powers, has either majority tried to work with Republicans at all on any of these changes that you'd like to see? I think I know the answer.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fair question. No, there has not been any real attempt to work with me. I can't speak for the Assembly, but like you, I probably know the answer. But you know what? That's all right. We introduced a resolution every day. I don't know how many times it ended up being. I don't know how many times it's at now, to rescind the governor's emergency powers. And they voted it down every day. And it wasn't until 17, 18 times, then the pressure mounted for them to do something themselves. So we'll continue to try to bring a spotlight to this and let the public know this resolution is there. This isn't a mystery. We don't have to wait for the governor. We don't have to wait on some sort of data point that's not forthcoming. They have the ability to do it. They voted on a bill, and they touted their ability to rescind these. We have the ability to rescind any of these directives. Well, here you go. Here's two that I think are very uncontroversial, have no basis in science, that would seem to me to be sort of an easy way, bipartisan, and certainly help our workers, our small businesses, our restaurants, our bars, our hospitality industry that has been very, very hard hit by the pandemic. So, we'll see what happens, but we're going to keep pounding away and talking about this until something happens.
Off-topic questions? Real quick, there's an elephant in the room with the Tom Reed story. How do you feel about how he's dealing with his situation, and how does that compare to how the governor has dealt with a similar situation, but on sort of a higher or high-profile level?
Sure. Towards me? I mean,
Both you and Leader Barclay,
okay.
if you don't mind.
I can't speak for him. Look, so I thought the way the congressman handled the issue in his statement, he was very contrite. He was very apologetic. He took, from what I read, very strong ownership of his actions. And I think equally important, he took accountability and the consequences that come with those actions. So his political career is effectively over. He's, made the announcement he's not running for re-election. He's certainly not running for election to any other office. And, he is going to be focused on, his continuing battle with alcohol, which, as I'm sure everyone here knows, is not that journey never ends. When you're dealing with dependency issues, that goes on for the rest of his life. And so I thought he took accountability. I think it took a lot of bravery for Second Lieutenant Davis to come forward. I was an Army officer. She's an Army officer. I thought her story as to why she came forward resonated, makes a lot of sense. If you're going to lead people into combat, you have to, take accountability for yourself and decide what kind of leader you want to be. And again, I think the congressman was very contrite and took ownership as well. So I think you saw two examples on different ends of the spectrum of accountability and leadership. And I think that contrasts with what we've seen here in Albany, where we haven't seen that in that way. And that's all I have to say about that. I don't know if Leader Barkley wants to add.
No, I think you did a great job, Leader Ort. These seem like credible claims. Every credible claim needs to be investigated. I'm pleased that Congressman Reed took the initiative on himself, took accountability, and is not running for re-election. He's not running for governor. I think that takes a big step. And so I would say Godspeed to him and good luck with his issues with his alcoholism.
Would it be appropriate for him to resign immediately? Because that's a claim that people have made about the governor, about the effectiveness of his ability to govern. Is he still able to effectively?
Yeah, so I think you're trying to compare apples and oranges necessarily. The governor has had 8 claims lodged against him. He's also had a huge issue with the nursing home fatality cover-up and a whole host of other issues, frankly. So the idea, we called for his impeachment because we simply don't think that he can govern. When we have massive issues right here in the state with our budget due obviously April 1st, with the pandemic still ongoing and other issues, we just don't feel like he could govern. He ought to step aside and we can go through the impeachment process, which I mind you, does have due process rights. It's not like he's just getting thrown out of office. Maybe the Senate won't impeach him and he can come back. But so ultimately, I don't think they're necessarily an apple-to-apple comparison. I would say it's more an apple-to-oranges comparison.
Next question? Okay.
Thanks, guys. Nice job, buddy. Thanks for taking that one.